niece Gwen, reading aloud for you from my novella Goddess, Chapter 56. Once they cleared the doorway, Mary and Maddie walked into the center of the barn and gazed around them in amazement. "Oh my," Mary said, "what an amazing space this is." Maddie hadn't quite known what to expect, but the scene inside the barn took her breath away. This lovely barn, which had once contained all the elements of an active farm such as livestock, a tractor, a combine, a haymow to feed the animals from, and all the other assorted items relevant to a working farm, had been transformed into an artist's studio. And yet the basic integrity of the barn had remained unchanged, for hay and straw littered the floorboards. The rafters, once filled to the bursting point with hay, were stuffed full of all manner of materials: sacks of concrete, lumber on pallets, slabs of shale, the discarded remnants of various and sundry art projects, sheets of steel and aluminum, and a massive slab of limestone. And yet the basic integrity of the barn had remained unchanged, for hay and straw littered the floorboards. The rafters, once filled to the bursting point with hay, were stuffed full of all manner of materials: sacks of concrete, lumber on pallets, slabs of shale, the discarded remnants of various and sundry art projects, sheets of steel and aluminum, and a massive slab of limestone. Some of the horse stalls still remained, having been converted into private workshop areas. One former horse stall boasted a huge array of power tools, bags of cement, bags of rock, and a gigantic slab of marble. An enormous canvas of a dairy cow served as a focal point against the far wall. The cow gazed out complacently from the canvas, forever frozen in time, contentedly chewing her cud. Maddie glanced to her left, and her heart warmed in surprise at the sight of so many statues, all of them in various stages of completion. One piece in particular caught her eye, that of a bronze sculpture of 3 children frolicking under a willow tree and dancing in and out of the fronds. A shipping tag was attached to the right leg of the littlest girl. Close by the sculpture stood an enormous wooden box, large enough to contain this lovely sculpture, ready to be boxed up and shipped out to the lucky owner who'd commissioned this work of art to display in his yard. Or perhaps it was destined for a center devoted to children and would be installed in a public place for all to admire. Maddie's heart filled up with gladness and burst open. This was a place of joy. The thought arose unbidden. Had the artist sculpted anything out of gray oolitic stone from Indiana, or from marble shipped in from Italy? Maddie's musings were interrupted by the sound of a child's cry, and she forgot herself and her mission and hurried back outside to the farmyard to attend to the child. Mary followed her. Maddie flung open the barn door and walked back out onto the farmyard. Lady Venus and Victoria stood over the pile of discarded farm machinery that had been covered up by a tarp. And as she drew near, she realized her error, for one of the goddesses had removed the tarp to reveal a partially completed statue. Lady Venus and Victoria whispered words of assurance. Intrigued, Maddie crept closer. "Hush, little one," Lady Venus whispered. "We've come to help." Maddie drew near. "Oh, I don't mean to complain," a soft, childlike voice said, "but I do so long to be finished. I feel so alone, so isolated, so very lonely." "Yes," Lady Venus said in a low voice. "Hush, little one, help is near." Maddie felt a sudden weight on her shoulder and assumed it was Lady Venus. But when she looked up, she saw that Victoria had placed her hand gently upon her shoulder. Victoria gazed at her with sorrow. Without speaking, she nodded at the block of marble that had been concealed by the tarp. A round shape, roughly the size of a large cantaloupe, emerged from the surface. "Maddie, please meet Little StormCloud." Maddie gazed at the block of marble. Now that she was looking at it close up, she could see that the sculpture had only just been started. The artist had made it as far as the sweet, smiling face of a small girl with long braids emerging from the stone. Then Maddie noticed an easel set to one side of the sculpture. Clipped to the easel was a photo of a young girl, seated cross-legged on the ground, her little face gazing upwards into the night sky. When the sculpture was finished, the figure would be the same size as a human girl. Peeking out from a misshapen chunk of gray stone appeared the head of the Native American girl. Although her little face was clearly delineated in stone, the artist had yet to finish the rest of the sculpture. Her head, neck, and the beginnings of two long plaited braids were perfectly sculpted, emerging from the hard foam of the marble. But the remainder of the child's body was trapped inside. It looked terrifyingly as if the poor girl were trapped in the block of stone. She looked as if she were drowning. She was trapped. She was trapped. Tears crept down the little girl's downy cheeks. "She won't finish me. She says it's no use. But I keep telling her, please don't give up. Don't give up on me." She sobbed brokenly. "I think it's too late." "Nonsense," Victoria said brusquely. "It's not too late. I can see light shining from under the door." And then the little girl spoke the words that lanced Maddie's heart with pain. "She took the bottle with her," the little girl said. "It may be over already." The statues shuddered. They looked at one another with wondering, worried frowns. Then slowly, the three of them turned to face Maddie. "Uh-oh, what's going on?" An uncomfortable silence filled the silent farmyard. Lady Venus stepped forward and gazed intently into Maddie's eyes. "My love, you see the agony of this little statue? She needs to be finished. If she doesn't get completed, then by the time the estate is wrapped up, she'll be flung into the scrap heap." "The estate? Do you mean the artist has died?" Lady Venus looked sad. "She hasn't died yet." Maddie widened her eyes in horror as the full weight of Lady Venus's words bore down on her. Lady Venus nodded. "Being thrown away Tossed into a scrap bin is a fate worse than death for a statue. She was meant to bring joy into people's lives. Lady Venus's features contorted with emotion. When you come right down to it, my darling Madeline, that's all we're really meant to do. We bring joy and a sense of meaning into people's lives. Maddie nodded. Lady Venus smiled through her tears. My little one, now do you understand why I brought you? Mary stepped forward to embrace her. Again, Maddie was struck at how odd it felt to be embraced by a statue of her own size and warm to the touch. It was like sipping a mug of hot chocolate with tiny marshmallows on top, just the way her mother used to make it for her. That's how warm and comforting it felt. At last, Maddie pulled away, wiping at her tears. You understand, Lady Venus whispered, a trace of wonder in her voice. Yes, Maddie said, I do. Lady Venus and Victoria and Mary discreetly drew back as Maddie turned around to face the entrance to the barn, then looked back at Mary. Will you come with me? I shall guide you to the artist, Mary said, and took her hand, and together they walked back into the barn. Mary led her to a closed door, and without being told, Maddie knew the artist was behind this door. Was the artist sleeping, or was she already dead? She shivered. Either prospect frightened her. She studied the closed door. A shaft of light shone through the cracks. Her heart thudded. She walked quietly toward the door, then placed her hands on it. Okay, now or never. She pushed the door gently, wincing as it creaked open. She looked back one last time at Mary, who smiled at her, and then disappeared inside.